And welcome to today's webinar on Module 3 of the CSBG Annual Report. For those who do not know me, I am Katie Kajowski, Research Director at NASCAS. We're excited that you're able to join us today on this call. We know that you are all very busy and really appreciate you making time for this webinar. To begin, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the chat option on the webinar toolbar. The toolbar is located on the right-hand side of your screen. You see a text box where you can type a question. Please all panelists to ensure that all of our presenters can see your questions. We will questions aloud at the end of the webinar, and anything that we don't have time for, we will put into an FAQ and post to our website. The webinar will be presented by Seth Hassett, Director of the Division of State Assistance at the Office of Community Services, Jocker, Director of Training and Technical Assistance from the Partnership, Courtney, Senior Associate, also from the Community Action Partnership. Additionally, Denise Harlow won't be able to join us today. Our presenters are Barbara Mooney, Director of the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers and a consultant with NASCAS, and Cook, CSBG Deputy Director with NASCAS. The agenda for today's webinar is to discuss Module 3 of the new CSBG report. This is the community level module. We will consider elements of Module 3, including Section A, the Community Initiative Status Form, Section B, Community National Performance Indicators, and Section C, the Community Strategy. We will discuss available and coming tools and sources. So to get started, I'd like to ask Court to give us a brief introduction from the Community Action Partnership.
Everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. I am the Senior Associate from the Community Action Partnership. Happy to be here presenting with this group, and we just wanted to ANSERT and NASCAS as well as OCS for coordinating these webinars and getting this information out to the network. And then as always, always feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions or you all might need. So welcome to the webinar today, and thanks for joining.
And now I'd like to turn it over to Seth Hassett from OCS.
And thanks to everyone who's participating in this webinar. And we've NASCAP's work to coordinate this whole series of webinars and work of all the partners who are involved. We just did a round of webinars on Module 4 of the annual report, and we found that some of the questions that we received were really almost as important as the content that was presented to us in staying on a good course with this performance management framework. We're going to be talking today about Module 3, which is the community level measures for CSBG. All the content here is new, but as other elements, with other elements of our annual report, it's important to emphasize that everything about community level strategies is to be implemented is locally determined. And Module 3 is really important for CSBG because it provides an opportunity to document that important community level work and the fact that is being made. Lots of options, as you'll see, in how we do that reporting, and we look forward to talking with you about the content. I'll hand over back to NASCAP for a moment.
Thanks, Seth. So we will get started with the content for today. Next slide. Thank you. Ask OCS. Yes. Please go ahead, Seth.
Sure. Thanks. This is the other thing we're going to be talking about today is just to give a background, and those of you who have been participating in this presentation so far have kind of seen some of this, but it's always important to reemphasize that Module 3 is part of a larger effort of an overall effort to improve our performance management framework for CSBG. And this multi-tiered framework, it begins with local organizational standards, it includes state and federal accountability measures, And then what we're working on here is results of our work, the results-oriented management and accountability system, and the work that we're calling Roma Next Generation. And the report includes updated and refined outcome measures, or NPIs, both individual and family level, which is what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks of webinars, and community level, which is what we're talking about today. Restoration is intended to demonstrate commitment to outcomes, to strengthen local solutions for families and communities, and overall to improve our performance management and performance measurement efforts, which are intertwined. The goal is to demonstrate continuous quality improvement across a complex system and build agent capacity for the long term. Next slide. I'll go back. To highlight that the reporting for CSBG, the annual report, in the middle of kind of migration from one process to another. So we kind of call this hybrid system. Here we implemented Module 1 of the annual report, which is the administrative module for CSBG. This year, and that at the same time, we have continued to use the CSBIS report, or information survey, to gather information about individual and family outcomes and any community information that was received under the old system. This year, we're in the process of preparing, local agencies are preparing to collect and document information that will be needed for modules 2, 3, and 4 of our annual report. And next year, they will have, starting for fiscal year 18, that's when agencies will submit their first annual reports, the modules 2, 3, and 4, including the community level measures that we're going to be discussing today. Next slide. So how does it all fit together? Just to emphasize that everything begins with a community level needs assessment, that all of these are locally determined strategic plans and community action plans. So all the services and strategies that we're talking about here are developed within the communities that receive CSBG. CSBG state plan is a way to describe the kind of big picture, and including those administrative elements of the work and how the overall effort will be overseen by the state. And the annual report is a chance to document everything, what's been achieved in terms of the administrative outcomes and how the funds were used, and the communal and family, individual and family outcomes. All of this is important, not just for documenting and using at the local level, but also for us to report to Congress and to other stakeholders about the achievements and the work that we're doing. And I'll just emphasize the theory of change. This has been circulated widely. This is the latest version of the community action theory of change. And from our perspective, this is close to final. We are currently in the process of circulating this within our office and within ACF to make sure that it meets the communication, 508 compliance, and other things. But the content here is pretty consistent with what's been in prior rounds. I think the services and strategies are now close aligned with the domains that are in the annual report. So that's an item that's been updated. But overall, this is the content that we are using as we move forward, and shows all the elements of a performance management framework and a theory of change focused on those goals, individuals, families, and communities. Next. So today we're focusing on Module 3, which is the community level strategies and outcomes. And we're looking forward to getting into the content today. And with that, I will hand over to the Community Action Partnership and to Courtney. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate that. So what we're obviously going to be talking about today is Module 3 of the CSBG Annual Report, which is all about the community level. I know that there's been some anxiety out there about the community level module. We're going to talk through the module and identify what you can report on. I know that not everyone is able to report on the same kinds of community level work, such as working on homeless rate in your community, but the module is expanded to capture more of the work that you might be doing. On the next slide, you can see a kind of a screenshot of the Economic Opportunity Act and CSBG Act, and this is really kind of just reiterate the importance of addressing poverty on both the individual family level as well as the community level. So it's very much rooted in our history of community action to do both of these types of work. So with the next slide, we see some excerpts from the CSBG Act. It's actually included in the purpose and goals. It reflects the importance of addressing poverty on both the individual family level and the community level. So as you can see here, quote from the CSBG Act, to provide assistance to states and local communities working through a network of community action agencies, other neighborhood-based organizations for the reduction of poverty, revitalization of low-income communities, and empowerment of low-income families and individuals. Then another that says that the greater use of innovative and effective community-based approaches to attacking the causes and effects of poverty and of community breakdown. So kind of reminding everyone the importance that's reflected through the CSBG Act and in our history. Module 3, it's really about the renewal of the CSBG network's understanding of the necessity of working toward community change as well as individual and family outcomes. And it creates just a reporting space for agencies who are tackling the complex community level work. And so, you know, it's always been kind of this part of the DNA, so to speak, of community action. And the emphasis here is that the new CSBG annual report provides a more accurate way of reporting with more options of how to report community level work. So as with family and individual NPS and services, it's mandatory to report on all of them or even any of them if you're not doing the work. But if you own the work or you will be starting more community level work based on the findings of your community needs assessment, then Module 3 is where you want to make sure you're reporting that out. On the next slide, you can see that there are 3 different sections to this module. The first one is Community Initiatives Status Form. Section is Community National Performance Indicators, or the MPI. And then section C is the Community Strategy. And we're all of those throughout this webinar. So then the slide also shows you kind of an overall crosswalk between Module 3, the community level, and this old CSGIS survey. You can see that Section A corresponds to NPI 4.1, expanding opportunities through community-wide partnerships. Section E coordinates to NPIs 2.1 through 2.3, as well as NPI 3.2. And then Section C relates to NPI 2.1, community involvement and revitalization. See, if you were reporting in these sections previously in the CSBGIS survey, this is kind of maps to in the new CSBG report within Module 3. And be a more detailed crosswalk of these indicators and where it maps to the new annual report throughout this webinar. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Barbara Mooney to talk about community needs.
Thank you. So as we know, the basis of work that a community action agency does is the community needs assessment that they have previously done. And when agencies talk about the needs that they find in that community assessment, when things are considered to be community level needs. So our community lacks living wage jobs. There needs for more affordable housing in our community. We have a high unemployment rate. We have a low high school graduation rate in school districts that serve our customers with low income. So these are all needs that are broader than just the needs of individuals and families. And so we look at those needs to decide how we're going to identify our outcomes. So next generation really asks us to consider more closely than we have been, as the previous speakers have said, going back to our initial intent, but ask the entire CSBG network to consider how community conditions can be changed. So if there's a need for living wage jobs, how are we going to increase that? How are we going to increase the number of living wage jobs in our community? How can we add more affordable housing units? Can we increase high school graduation rates for low-income students? Should agencies get involved in this kind of a response? Well, it's the appropriate way to address the need that was identified. Because individual responses will help in some ways. Well, people will get jobs, families will find housing, teens will graduate, but it will not turn the curve on a situation facing the entire community. So how do we act? So we are going to think about the strategies that help to change these conditions. What are you going to do? What are agencies going to do to make these changes? And who will we partner with? Because we know for sure that these wicked problems, these difficult problems, must involve a multiple approach to solving them, that one agency cannot do them alone. So this is what Module 3 is going to help us do. Collect information on the agency's community-level initiatives, case the connection between initiatives and outcomes, demonstrate how initiatives are reported time. That's a unique feature of this community-level reporting module. It will populate and auto-calculate information from year to year and the results that are entered into the information in the report. And it will show that we actually achieved some change. And we expect that most community action agencies will only have a small number, a handful perhaps, of initiatives that include community strategy, that include community-level change. So types of community-level work are we going to report? So we are expecting that we'll be reporting on initiatives that are planned and those that are achieved, both. And each reporting period, the agency will include those initiatives that were started, continued, or completed within that reporting period time. And we believe these are initiatives that the agency does not do either alone or in partnership with others. And those are all included in this community report. But what's not included is community meetings or some other activities that really aren't designed to pursue specific outcomes at the community level. So going to monthly meetings of a group of service providers, that sort of thing, doesn't have a specific outcome, and so would not be reported using an initiative form, report. About the initiative status form that makes it so important to us when it looks complicated and time-consuming. This is only about initiatives that are community-level outcomes. I said this is probably only a few per year, and there are drop-down menus and auto-population that will make it quicker to both enter the first year and then update it in following years. It should be something that you have the information readily available for, and are only going to be completing the form as you need to, based on your state reporting requirements. So it won't take a lot of time, and it won't actually be as complicated as it might seem at first glance. Will agencies be required to report in Module 3? Now, this is a question that we've heard over and over, and it's something that we want to restate is true about all of the information in the annual report. The community action agencies complete that community needs assessment that I spoke of earlier, and will provide the state with what's called a community action plan that really is going to say, this is how we as an agency are responding to the unique local causes and conditions of poverty. And in that plan, you'll be defending, you'll be explaining your priorities and say how you've made decisions. And we expect that the local agencies will be able to defend their decisions, and they'll have clear outcomes identified, and they'll have a rationale for selecting the strategies being implemented. That being said, if activities point to a community-level intervention or a community-level need that's so extreme that must be addressed, then it would be expected that the agency would be addressing the community-level work. That's up to the agency to decide, and it's up to the discussions that you have with the state offices and with the partners in your community to determine how you can actually respond to the needs that you've identified at the local level by your community assessment. So what about that status report form? I'm turning over to NASCAP.
Yeah, Barbara, and hello everyone. This is Lauren Cook from NASCAP. I'm very excited to walk through this community initiative status form with you today. You've probably taken a look at this. In Module 3, it's the first section, Section A, and this form kind of came to be out of a lot of conversation throughout the network, and had some final polishing and editing from a group of Roma practitioners. So it's one of the pieces that we think adds a lot of value to CSBG annual report. Community initiative status page would be completed by any agency wishing to report community-level outcomes. The form provides a central place to report really valuable information about a community initiative. And that could be a community initiative that started, was continuing, or may have ended during the current reporting period. So the information reported on the status form would be selected via drop-down menu or written as a narrative for some of the items. And in future reporting periods, agencies would have the opportunity to update this status form so that we would be able to take a look at an initiative's progress. We're thinking about what kind of information we're gaining from adding this form into the report. It's going to give us really a better understanding of what our network is doing to make community change. It's a really good tool to aid in explaining what an agency is doing in the community, and it's a way to show work and results over time, because we know that community change isn't done just in a year, sometimes not 2 or 3 years. So we're able to also use this as kind of a planning tool, so an agency could use these questions to help them define their community level work. You can see that within this form there's some basic information about the initiative, and then we also tie in the NPIs and the strategies into this form. And right now it's kind of a flat form, so you can't see where those drop-down boxes would show up. But if we look at initiative year, that's a place where we may use a down box so that you could indicate what year you're in of your initiative. Number 3, or problem identification. That really allows you to talk about the needs in your community and what helped you identify this as an area that you wanted to focus on, the goal or agenda of your initiative. Then you would identify the issue or community domain. And you can see from the list that's in the box already, these align with the domains for the NPI. later in the report. First, filling out this form, you'd identify the ultimate expected outcome. And this would be worked in as kind of a drop-down of the MPIs that you could choose from. And you can go back one slide, please. Select your identified community. We know that you might be working in a neighborhood, a city, or your whole service area, so you would be able to select that. Also, the expected duration. So maybe you're in the first year of your initiative, but you expect that it lasts up 5 years. And then leadership type. We know that community level work is most often not done alone, so you would be working with other community partners, but you could select if you're doing this initiative independently, if you're the core organizer of a multi-partner initiative, or if one of multiple active investors and partners. And forward, you could also provide in a narrative kind of the key or top partners that you're working with in the initiative. We get to the strategies. So this is where we'd work it into the form where you could select video buttons or drop downs, which strategies you were using to work toward your outcomes. Number 12, progress on outcomes or indicators. You could select whether you have no outcomes to report at this time, you have interim outcomes to report, or your final outcomes as you're wrapping up your community initiative. And then 13, the impact of outcomes. This gives you a little more opportunity to add some context to what you're reporting in the NPIs. That we can't see the full scope of work or all of the information about what you've been working on from reporting in the NPIs. So you could add some additional information there. And then 14, outcomes and indicators to report. This is where you would report on the NPIs in the NPI forms. A status, each year you could update if you're coming to the end, initiative is active, initiative ended early, initiative ended as planned, or it was completed and is still delivering value. And 19, lessons learned. We think this could be a really good tool to help us learn as a network in terms of what's working and what's not in different community initiatives. So thinking about specifically the NPIs for the community level module, these are organized by domains, just like in Module 4 for the individual and family level domains. So these are very similar to those that are in Module 4. A few points that we want to reiterate. The NPIs are a menu of options. You only select and report on the NPIs that tie with your community initiative. If there are no NPIs in this report that met up with your initiative, have an other option in every domain. So you could add indicators. We do want to talk about how there's a difference between community level NPIs and individual and family, which Barbara touched on a little bit earlier. And there are two indicator types. We have counts of change and rates of change, which Katie will be reviewing with us. Also, some rates of change NPIs are outcomes that will take multiple years to achieve, and the agency will be leading or working with a number of partners on those. Those are those kind of larger scale initiatives. And next. Again, some additional points, just making or specifying a difference between community level work and individual and family. Community level MPIs are not about adding up all the clients and calling that community change. It's really more of a planned effort with strategies and outcomes that have been thought out and used throughout the initiative. So if you are developing a new initiative, the count of a new asset would be the community level NPI. Number of your customers who attend the service and achieve outcomes would be counted in the family level NPIs. We'll take a look at the community NPIs, and Katie will be walking us through those. Katie, there?
Technical difficulties. Thank you, Lauren.
Yep,
I'm going to take us through the Community National Performance Indicators to take a deeper look at what's included in this report. As Lauren mentioned, this is a menu of options required to report on any one indicator. All reporting is based on your community needs assessment and the actual initiatives that you're doing at the community level. I'd like to point out something that I mentioned as well, is that these are assets that you're reporting. You're not reporting on people here. I'll be reporting on people in Module 4. Module 3 is all about the community level work that you're doing, these assets that you're creating in your community. Shows us the employment indicators. Slides that we're using in this section come from our annotated version of the annual report, which can be found on the NASCAP website. Take a look later where you can find these resources. This is Domain 1, the employment indicators. As you can see on this slide, there are counts of change and there's rates of change. If you select to report on counts of change, you're not required to also report on rates of change. You can do either or. And in some situations, you might select to report in both types of indicators. Under all of the annual report is based on the work that you're doing in your organization, regardless of funding source. So you can report on work at the community level with any type of funding in any program within your organization. So employment indicators have expand on what you currently are reporting on in NPIs 1.1A through D. And of course, the rates of change are brand new indicators. And these are the assets. For example, these are the number of job opportunities created or maintained in your community, number of people who are obtaining that job. The change, you can report on the percent decrease in the unemployment rate or the underemployment rate. Throughout indicators, there's multiple columns to report on. And what I mean by that is, notice in the counts of change, there's 4 columns. You'll select the type of community you're working in. Remember, from that community initiative status form, you're identifying if you're working in a city or a neighborhood or your entire service area for that matter. In the second column, you'll put in the target. How many assets do you plan to create in your community? In the column, you'll report the actual results. End of the reporting period or the initiative period, how many assets did you create? The column is the performance target accuracy, and that will auto-populate for you. Rates of change, we have 7 columns. The first column, your identified community. This column is the baseline. When you did this initiative, what was the rate in that community? What was the unemployment rate when your initiative began? The third column is the target. What do you anticipate? What do you plan to make that unemployment rate in your community? The fourth column is the expected percent change from baseline. That will auto-populate for you on the information that you enter in the second and the third column. The column are your actual results. At the end of the program period or the reporting period, you'll enter what is that actual unemployment rate. In the 7th column are columns that will auto-populate for you as well. The 6th, yes, 6th and 7th. The actual percent change from the baseline and the performance target accuracy. Next slide. This next, the second domain, education and cognitive development indicators. Right now, looking at the counts of change. Again, these are the number of assets, the number of early childhood or preschool education assets or resources added to the identified community. The number of post-secondary education assets added to the community. As you see, there are some indicators that are similar to what was reported in PI's 6.0 and 2.1, and in other cases, we have some new indicators reporting here. Next slide. Domain 2, education and cognitive development indicators, and these are the rates of change. Remember that you can report in counts, you can report in rates. It's an either or, and in some cases you might select report in both counts and rates of change. All of these are new indicators. Examples in these rates of change are the percent increase of children in the identified community who are kindergarten ready. So you'll start with a baseline rate. What is the percent of children who are kindergarten ready? What do you want to change that percent to that actually happened? Next. Infrastructure indicators. This is a third domain. From here, you can see that these are the counts of change. What's the number of new accessible assets and resources created in that community? So we have commercial assets, financial assets, technological assets, transportation assets, other public and physical improvements, community gardens, parks, libraries. That's the thing that's being reported in these indicators. The indicators expand on what you may have already been reporting in PI 2.2. And these are just the counts of change. There's also an opportunity to report on other counts of change should you be work that's not already identified in this menu of options. Next slide. Rates of change for infrastructure and asset building indicators. All of these are new. Some examples are the percent decrease of abandoned or neglected buildings, the percent increase in emergency response time. Again, these are all rates of change. This is the third domain. Just a option for you to report on. Next. Indicators. This is the fourth domain. On this slide, you can see both the counts of change and the rates of change. In the counts of change, we have the options to report on the number of safe and affordable housing units developed in the identified community. In the change, you might be tracking the percent decrease in rate of homelessness or the foreclosure rate. Change are also our new indicators. We have some new indicators also in the counts of change as well. Some work that you might be doing, you may have already been reporting in NPI 2.1. Health and social indicators. This is the domain. On the screen, you can see both the counts of change and rates of change as options here. The counts of change is expanding on what you may have already been reporting in NPI 2.2. Number of accessible and affordable physical health assets, behavior and mental health assets. And these are counts of assets, not counts of people. And this work that you're doing in collaboration with others that you're contributing to in your community. In rates of change, you might be training and reporting on the percent decrease in the childhood obesity rate or child immunization rate. These are just some of the options that exist in this new annual report. Next. See more health and social behavioral indicators. This is, again, the 5th domain. All of these are the rates of change that you see on your screen, and these are all new indicators. Civic engagement, community involvement indicators. This is the 6th domain. There are 2 sets of these civic and community involvement indicators. This set of indicators covers the 2nd goal, national goal. So as we saw on that theory change, there are 3 national goals now. The 2nd one is communities where people with low incomes live are healthy and offer economic opportunity. The indicators report out on that. An example is the % increase of people participating in public hearings, policy forums, community planning, and other advisory boards. There are report here, you may have been reporting similar type of work in NPIs 2.3, 3.1, and 3.2. Next slide. So that of civic engagement and community involvement indicators. This is reporting on goal 3, which is people with low income are engaged and active in building opportunities in communities. Example is the % increase of people with low income to acquire and maintain leadership roles with the CSBG eligible entity or other organization. Work that you may be doing, you might have been reporting in 3.1 or 3.2. Next slide. In each domain, you have an option of an other indicator. So again, this is a menu of options for reporting purposes. If the work you're doing doesn't necessarily fit in any of those indicators within the domain, you can insert it here. So we have other NPIs for counts of change and other NPI options for rates of change. So both of those are within each of the domains. So I'm going to turn it over to Jarl from the partnership.
Hey, this is Jarl Crocker from the Community Action Partnership. I'm Director of Training and Technical Assistance here at the partnership, and we're moving on to discussing the community level strategies. So next slide. The slides you're about to see, I think, are relatively straightforward. They are lists of the strategies that you can report on by each domain. I think just a couple of things to call out here. There are some new strategies and some expanded strategies carrying over from the old IS. So I think it's helpful just to make sure you crosswalk this with what you've reported on previously, just to make sure that you can see the options you have for reporting on your community level strategies. And again, we think that the new annual report does give you an additional level of detail to make sure that you're able to report out on all the important work that our agencies are doing when it comes to their community level initiatives. So what you see here are the list of community strategies list from that Module 3 Section C for employment strategies. And you see here in the red what has been expanded on from the previous IS and what strategies are new that you can now report on that you previously weren't able to do. So this lists all the employment strategies. I won't go through each one, but again, this is helpful when you are back at your agencies doing the crosswalk, looking at what you used to report on and what you can now report on in the new annual report with that added level of detail. Slide. Here are the community strategies list for the education and cognitive development domain, and again, track those red lines and the updates and additions. So you can see that the Preschool for All campaign was expanded on from your previous MPIs, and there is a new strategy that you can report on, the education and cognitive development legislative changes. Next slide. These are the strategies you can report on for the infrastructure and asset building domain. Again, a longer list of strategies, but there are a couple that have been expanded on, a couple new MPIs expanded on from the previous IS, and again, a new strategy that you can report on there at the bottom, the infrastructure and asset building legislative changes, again, just allowing you an additional nuance, an additional level of detail that you can report on with these strategies. Slide. Here are the community strategies for your housing efforts at the community level. Again, note what's been expanded on from the previous IS. And again, you can now report on those housing legislative changes. So again, just note what's been added and what's been updated as you do that crosswalk. Next. Here are the strategies list for your health and social behavioral development strategies. Again, a couple of call-outs here with what's been expanded on from the previous MPIs, and then that new strategy added for health and social behavior development legislative changes. Next. Here's the list here for community support strategies, a relatively straightforward list, again with those call-outs for your off-hours, transportation system development, transportation services coordination and support, your community support policy changes, your support legislative changes, and then, as always, that option to add in other support strategies, and again, those are included, that other option is included across all of the domains, giving you that flexibility to report on any strategies you're using that are not listed. You see the strategies list for your emergency management strategies. Again, a very straightforward list with the crosswalk from the old IS and those additional services that you can report on. And next slide. I'll turn it back over to talk in more detail about examples.
Sarah, it's Barbara N. And I'm just going to walk through 3 examples with you just to make this real. So the example is that the agency identified that the housing stock in their community is not meeting energy efficiency standards. No, your community might not have energy efficiency standards, and you might be saying, what are these energy efficiency standards? But this was an agency that had efficiency standards in their community, and this was a way for them to be able to identify what the need was. We have to be able to clearly identify what it is that we think is a barrier or is a problem or is a cause or condition. And so there may be some other way that you identify that there's housing stock that needs to be improved in some way. And your outcome is that you want to improve the housing stock, particularly for the low-income individuals. And so there are 2 ways that you'll do that. That you might account or a rate of change. What's your strategy, or how are you going to address that? Your initiative may be that the Community Action Agency operates a weatherization program. So those are 3 pretty simple concepts. Let's look at where we would put them on the new report. We would, of course, create a community initiative status form, and we would talk about this program, and we would think about what the initiative or community is that we're going to be serving. And then we would identify community NPI 4B with the number of safe and affordable housing units maintained or improved through other rehabilitation efforts in the identified community. That is the numbers of housing units maintained. But I also want to use community NPI 4H, which is the percent of increase of affordable housing in the identified community. One of the examples that I just heard recently is I was in Virginia and talking to the housing authority there. They're spending a lot of time and effort labbing houses and doing just exactly what this initiative might speak to. And they talked about how the number of housing units that they have worked on isn't giving them enough information to know how much they're doing. They know what the percent is of increase of the housing in their community. They ran into some barriers. They found that if you looked at the number that they had compared to all housing units in the whole county, it was it indicated a small effort. But then they looked at the fact that they had targeted certain communities, and that's why we're asking for the initiative form to identify the communities. Able to then say, in this community, this is the percent of increase of high quality, affordable housing in this identified community. As you put your strategies, well, your strategies would be, for example, strategy 4, housing initiative to improve housing stock in the community. Those are the places on the form that you would use. The next is of a community identifying a lower than average percent of low-income children who are to enter kindergarten. So this is an issue that they've identified. The children from families with low income are not ready to enter kindergarten at the same rate as the general population. And so what is their outcome? They want to be sure that children are ready to enter kindergarten, and they can think of a count and a rate of change. What's going to happen? What's their initiative? They're going to work together with a coalition to implement a preschool for all campaign. We're going to report that. Well, the status form will help us identify some of the basic elements of our initiative. The community indicator that's a count is 2A. The number of accessible and affordable early childhood or preschool education assets or resources to the identified community, or the percent of increase of children in the identified community who are ready for kindergarten. A Kentucky example here was is a program that had a 32% rate of school readiness in a certain zip code where there was a large number of families with low income. Worked over several years with combined strategies, many partners, and they were able to increase that rate to 33.7%. They had those numbers, they were clear about what they wanted to measure, and they moved forward. I would say something about both this example and the previous example. We do not, could you go back to the previous example? What we report on is the number of individuals in the household who improve their health and safety. With that in family NPIs in Module 4, and that would be 4G. Or if it was about energy efficiency, the number of households with improved energy efficiency, that would be in 4H. So the individual people and households that are served go into the Module 4 report, and this is about the community impact. Likewise, in the next one, would be reporting the number of children who demonstrated skills for school readiness. This would be in Family NPI 2B, or one of the other appropriate NPIs in Module 4. There are several that have to do with children increasing their skills. Okay, so what about an outcome that's not listed? There is something that we do in our agency, and I don't find it in the NPI list or in the strategies list. How do we report that? Well, you would community initiative status form with all of the appropriate information. Then you would choose another NPI on the appropriate domain in a place where you feel that it shows that's where the success is going to happen. And then you would select a strategy or if it was a strategy that's not identified, you would write in other under the appropriate domain. So there would be a place for you to add additional information to the report. I think that gives everyone a little bit of an idea of something about the formula.
Thank you, Barb. This is Katie N., and we're going to take a quick look at the formulas that are in both the counts of change and rates of change. Next slide, please. So during development of this report, we had a lot of questions about what exactly are these formulas? What is the story of telling how we are changing, for example, the unemployment rate in our community, or the kindergarten readiness rate in our community, or what's the story about changing the number of assets, financial assets in our community? So we sought the guidance of a statistician to review and confirm the formulas that we will be embedding in those Excel documents for you. We want to ensure that the calculations were correct and that we are entering the data correctly. Is it a whole number? Is it a decimal? Is it a percentage that we're entering into each cell? Next slide. Let's first at the counts of change. So this example is looking at employment indicators. We have an example for number of jobs created to increase opportunities for people with low incomes in the identified community. As I've been talking about, this is the number of assets, number of jobs, not the number of people obtaining that job. In this example, we have a community action agency who's working in their city as their identified community. They're targeting that 25 jobs will be created for people with low incomes in their city. At the initiative period, they actually created 20 jobs. So the performance target accuracy, this is where we're going to have auto calculations for you. That performance target accuracy is 80%. That's the percent of the target achieved. The formula embedded in that cell, in that column, is the actual results divided by the targeted results. Counts of change, and that will be true for every count of change in the fourth column. Next slide, please. With the rates of change, example is also using employment indicators. Example, we're looking at the percent decrease of the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in this particular community, which happens to be a city, is 5%. The community action agency targets that they're going to reduce that unemployment rate to 3%. Colorado populate, that's the expected change from baseline. You can see the formula is the first red bullet point for column 4. So in this example, the expected change from the baseline is a 40% decrease. Community Action Agency is anticipating that they're going to decrease the unemployment rate by 40%. At the end initiative period, their actual results were a 4% unemployment rate. The work that the Community Action Agency did, they contributed to reducing the unemployment rate to 4%. Column 6 is the actual percent change from baseline. So this is where the formula is. So actual change from baseline is a 20% decrease in the unemployment rate. The 7th column is the perfect target accuracy, and that will auto-populate, and that was a 5%. The reference target accuracy is 50%. So columns 4, 6, and 10 will have formulas embedded in them. Next slide. Is just highlighting that we recognize that columns 2, 3, and 5 currently reflect a number sign, and we recognize that we're asking you to insert a percentage. So we expect that we will be updating these columns from a number sign to a percent sign. So that's all that this slide is highlighting, that we know that there that number sign is there when we're asking for percentages at this point. Now I'm going over to Lauren to talk about our resources and tools that we have available.
Katie, if any of you have been on any of our past webinars for Module 4, you've probably seen some of these resources and tools already. So I'll go through these a little bit quickly, but want to make sure for anyone who's new to the webinar that you're aware of what kind of tools we have available on the NASCASP website. First, we'll talk about the new numbering system for the annual report. We have here at NASCASP developed a new numbering system for modules 2, 3, and 4 for the annual report. And we did that so that every data point would have its own unique number. That'll make it easier to reference different indicators or data points. It will be helpful at working with your vendors to update your systems. This new numbering system is available in an Excel document on our website at nascasp.org. Kind of next step with this new numbering is to update all of the other tools and forms that we have available right now. So right now, just want you to know that that will be coming, but you can use this new numbering system moving forward. Our next tool is the annotated CSBG annual report, and you've seen some screenshots from this tool throughout today's webinar. This is very helpful in terms of walking through the annual report and identifying which data points kind of expand on indicators or other data points in the CSBG IS survey, and which ones are completely new. Then or tools are a series of crosswalks that we have on our website. We've got a lot of requests and suggestions for different crosswalks to help us all in the network find different pieces of the performance management framework to help us transition to the new reporting. So the first one, kind of in the back there, is the high-level crosswalk, and this compares the CSBG IS survey to the annual report, but just pretty much based on the section. So if you are really getting started with the annual report, this would be a good tool. We have additional crosswalks between the annual report, the survey, and the org standards, as well as the Roma principles. We have another crosswalk that really focuses in on the NPIs in the CSBGIS and the CSBG annual report. So looking kind of for that low-hanging fruit in terms of what NPIs you've already been reporting on in the CSBGIS. This tool would help you identify which indicators in the annual report you would probably be able to report on in the first year or two of implementation. So you're probably wondering exactly where you can find these tools on our website. We have a CSBG annual report page on the NASCASP website, and all of these tools are available on that CSBG annual report tab. We developed more specific tools for each modules. We'll add those to those subpages there. So this is an example just of the list of tools that we have up on our website. We have the modules in Excel format. If you're in questions about the timelines for reporting, there's a tool posted. There's some sample presentations if you'd like to look at an example of a community initiative and how you would report that on the community status page. You could take a look at that presentation and all of the crosswalks that we have listed here. On our generation page, this is where you could find information on the theory of change and just kind of our movement with Roma Next Generation. Next slide. We are always developing tools as we receive suggestions and hear your feedback across the network, so just want to make the plug that we welcome any questions or suggestions here at CASP and take them very seriously in terms of creating new tools. We're working on some additional crosswalks. We have our webinar series that we've been doing this month. And another tool we know is really important to the network as we implement the annual report are these instruction manuals and the lexicon. We know that you're waiting for those, and we have drafts that are currently under review. We're making some additional edits to those, and we should have those available this summer. I'm going to promote the CSBG Training and Technical Assistance Resource Center. This is a website managed by the Community Action Partnership and NASCASP. So both TNTA providers are posting our tools to this website so that you have one central resource bank. So I encourage you to take a look at this website if you haven't before, or if you haven't in a while, maybe see what's new. There are links on both the Community Action Partnership's website and NASCASP's website if you're wanting to get to the TNTA Center. And time for questions. We've seen many of you entering your questions into the chat. So we'll go ahead and answer some of those. And just a reminder that you can always send your questions to Katie Kajowski, myself, Lauren Cook, or Jackie Orr here at NASCASP. Any of our other national or federal partners, we very often work together to give you the best answer possible. So now we can move to our Q&A period. The first question that we will go over is really related to kind of timeline for reporting. And I think Seth will be able to answer this for us. So the question is, when is the first report due, modules 2, 3, and 4?
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Yes, the data collection for modules 2, 3, and 4 begins in fiscal year 2018. So that is the fiscal year that is upcoming. The first submission date to the federal office of the OCS, all three of those modules, is March 31st, 2019. What I would emphasize about that, that's the date that the state will submit to OCS. So each state will set its own deadlines for when it needs to receive the information from the community action agencies or the eligible entities in order to review and by March 31st of 2019. But that's the first submission date for those modules to OCS.
Thanks. Now I have some questions about that community status form, that's section A of module 3. And I think Barbara will be able to answer these questions. The first one is, when do I fill out the community initiative status form?
Fill it out anytime that you have an initiative that you are working on. You could use it for new or existing initiatives, and you'll be filling it out as you develop that initiative and reporting it with the rest of your reporting.
And next question is, when filling out the community initiative status form, are we reporting on initiatives funded by CSBG funding or other funding received by the agency?
Good question, and it's a question that is, the answer is applicable to all of the reporting that we do here. It's the report, the annual report is related to all the agency's activities, not just CSBG funded activities. So that's true for this section as well as it is for the others.
Great. The final question on the community initiative status form is about the lessons learned. So are we expecting that to be answered regardless of the stage of an initiative? So are we just answering that at the end, or could we answer it throughout?
It's answered throughout the initiative. You might have different comments, different lessons that you learned in start the initiative. What were the challenges? What worked well? As you progress through the middle of the initiative, what have some partners dropped off? How do you maintain the synergy going forward? And at the end, what happened? What were the things that you observed? So there's a place for that lessons learned throughout the initiative.
Thank you. Our final question is about the NPI reporting. That's section C of Module 3. And the question is, do I have to report on both counts and rates? Can you answer that one?
Thank you, Lauren. Just like with Community Initiative Status Form, you're reporting on what makes sense to report. And all indicators are options. It may make, if you're at, for example, in the kindergarten readiness, if you're adding a new schooled community, you would report on count. But if you're working on increasing the percent of children who are kindergarten ready, you would report in the rates of change. In some cases, your work, you might be able to report in both counts and rates.
Okay. Thank you, Kat. Brings us to the end of the Q&A portion. We do have some upcoming webinars that will be essentially repeats of the webinar that you've seen today, but we're offering them again on Module 3 for the Pacific time zone and the Central time zone. So if you want to let this information really sink in, you're welcome to join a second time. If you have colleagues who aren't able to be on this webinar today, they need as well. And for all of our webinars on the Roma Next Generation update, on Module 4, on Module 3, we will post the recordings from the webinars on the NASCAS website, as well as the PowerPoint slide, which are already posted on our website now. So we thank you so much for being on the webinar with us today. NASCAS thanks all our national and federal partners for being a part of the webinar, and we hope to see you on ones in the future. And have a great day.